Deep Tech Byte. Hello and welcome to the third and final episode of Deep Tech Bytes from SGInnovate and me, Neil Moore. Today we're going to do what so many of us have dreamed of over the past months of the pandemic. We're going to leave Singapore's shores and explore the global deep tech community, without which we cannot hope to make a positive impact on the world. So, put your seat back upright, tray tables folded, and prepare yourself for takeoff into the big, wide world of Deep Tech Bytes. Today, I am joined remotely by Liza Noonan, the ASEAN Director at the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation, and SzeKi Sim, Head of Community and Brand at SGInnovate. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Hey, Neil. How goes it?
Very well, very well. I'd like to begin today's discussion in the way I always do, which is trying to get some insight behind the job title. What exactly do you do in these fabulous roles? Liza, perhaps you can start.
So CSIRO, but I'm going to shorthand it, Neil, today and call it CSIRO. What I fundamentally do for CSIRO in Southeast Asia is I'm a connector. I'm a connector for our partners across the region back into the very best of science and innovation in Australia.
Good to know. SzeKi, Head of Community and Brand. Tell me about that.
Hey, Neil. Thanks for that. Well, as Head of Community of Brand, I really bring people together. We drive conversations amongst players from across the deep tech ecosystem. And that's why Liza and myself are such great friends. We bring partnerships together because we believe that in working with various entities, it provides a lot more opportunities for our startups as they look to scale and grow their companies.
Well, this is all very, very handy because today we are going to talk about connections and the global deep tech ecosystem. And this might sound like an obvious question, but I would like to get a definition on why do we actually need a global deep tech system? We seems like in Singapore, we are doing great guns in deep tech. Why do we need a global ecosystem to be a part of? Liza.
Deep tech solves really important challenges for humanity. It's the AI that's discovering drugs and life-saving treatments faster. It's the, machine learning that can, predict the threat of cyber attack. These founders who are embarking on these deep tech journeys are so mission driven to solving these big challenges. They need a community of support to help them on that journey, to help them grow and scale their business to actually be able to solve that big problem. So, deep tech ecosystems, connects those mission-driven founders with, investors who believe in their purpose, with talent and people who are up for the journey to join their journey, with, the right government programs that can support them. But most of all, that community who wants to see them succeed. And with these challenges that these deep tech founders are setting out to solve, these are global challenges. And, therefore, in my mind, they need a global community of support, to go on that journey with them.
And how is that community, SzeKi? You're head of it, apparently. What are they like?
We've all heard the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. But really, it takes a whole ecosystem to help the founder. You add deep tech into it, it gets a lot more difficult, right? And these ecosystems, we work in parts, but we're independent but interdependent on each other, okay, to help to support innovation, and we work together as one unit. And in our role in SGInnovate, we've been very privileged to be working with various partners, CSIRO being one of them. So we work from across the ecosystem with embassies, government agencies, with the universities, not just in Singapore, but overseas as well, with trade associations. These connections are extremely helpful to founders who are looking to scale their startups beyond Singapore because they provide market access to the international market. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, Liza, if you remember, we partnered with the Austrade team during your Science Equals Good Business Month.
Exactly.
And and we had we had great activities. We had one specific event where the Australian startups and medtech connectors from Victoria were in session. And one of our portfolio companies, CMode, which is a company that uses AI to help clinicians predict strokes, they were looking to expand into Australia. So they came to this session knowing that the Australian team will be there, and they attended it to make these connections. So we introduced them to a Melbourne-based medtech connector. And when they went to Australia, this group helped them connect with players in the local ecosystem. Because we all know that when you want to build a company and you want to start operations in a specific market, you need those local connections to help you build your companies to to be able to start your business.
Absolutely.
So I understand that we need a big community to solve big problems, but how big is that community? How active is it at the moment? Is it thriving? How has the pandemic affected the ability of that community to connect and work together? Liza?
Look, I think the community is very global, and the community is finding ways to overcome the fact we can't get on a plane to meet each other in person. And I actually think this brings about, incredible opportunity. The promise of online platforms and virtual gatherings have been around for a while, but COVID has really forced the adoption. So a couple of recent examples, SGInnovate ran a fantastic A4I, AI for Good session. So amazing speakers, and you felt like you were really in an intimate conversation with these speakers, and you could have been anywhere in the world having that intimate conversation. And in the online chat, we were making I was making connections with people on the west coast of the US, with someone in France, and it's just a really great way to qualify quickly. Here's my community. Here's my tribe. Back in Australia this year, our accelerator program it normally does a big in-person demo day, grand affair, hundreds of people. For the first time, we took that demo day online. And the feedback from the teams that, from the cohort that had just, sort of graduated from the program said they got really high quality leads and focused engagement with really serious partners and investors. So, not people just there for the social aspects and coming along for a wine and cheese. Yeah, they had these breakout rooms and they were able to really get some great leads. So I think COVID is challenging the behavior and some of the attitudes about getting on with stuff that matters. So you don't have to get on a plane to have an early conversation with a potential customer or investor in another market. And for a country like Australia that has to overcome that tyranny of distance and cost when qualifying where you go in terms of your global market expansion, it can be really advantageous.
SzeKi, the community that you are head of, how are they responding to this crisis? Are they connecting more? Are they finding better and more frequent connections, or are you finding it a barrier to collaboration?
Okay, so COVID has forced us into a new world, forcing us to do things differently. I'll tell you, when COVID first hit and we had the lockdown here in Singapore, and if pre-COVID, SGInnovate, we had like 3-4 events a week. The team was completely swamped, great community. In the very early days, we had to bring in the wine and cheeses to bring people in, but we've gotten to a stage where it's a completely bare minimum. We don't even have drinks, right? And people come because of the content.
Yeah.
And you talk about post-COVID world, right in the middle of the pandemic. We were worried because we are a government entity, right? We are fully funded by the government and we do have KPIs to meet. We were worried about, okay, my gosh, are we going to be able to meet the numbers that we are committed to? But you know what? It's opened a new world because the digital platform, as Liza says, has created great access. It has given access to speakers, to attendees, and we are now back to pre-COVID days where we're doing 3 to 4 events a week. And we find that we're actually getting participants from literally across the globe, from Africa, from Australia, from Hong Kong, from India, literally from across the world, right? And even though we have an event at 10 a.m. Singapore time, we got people calling in from Europe, right? From Spain. So that's amazing. And you know what's great too? We've always had challenges, right? Bringing in people. We always want to bring in speakers. And to the event that Liza mentioned with the 2 AI rock stars, Professor Yoshua Bengio from Element AI and Dr. Kai-Fu Lee, that was our highest ranking event. We had over 2,000 people attending from across the globe. And we thought, we have this perception, right, that, hey, these community events is for people to come together and it's the face-to-face that makes it special. But you know what? It is really not the face-to-face that makes it special. It is also the ability to connect with people. And the digital platform has enabled us to connect with folks on the chat function. And we've also found that people are a lot more engaging because they don't have to show their face when they raise their hand to ask a question. So we're getting a lot more questions from the audience. And that's what a community is. You want people to be interacting. People are connecting on the chat saying, hey, I'm Liza and, I'm in Australia. I'm in CSIRO. Come connect with me on LinkedIn. And it's fascinating. So we're back to pre-COVID days. And we are building a community of more than what we were doing even before the COVID days, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a different style of engagement, right, SzeKi? Because normally you'd have the in-person event and you'd be, at the end, you'd be walking around and you'd be like getting business cards from people. But it was this really sort of live and dynamic. I'm connecting to you in real time, exchanging views on a piece of content or an opinion that's being shared by a speaker. We're finding our sort of common points of interest. And then we're connecting on LinkedIn and keeping the conversation going. It was actually, it felt a lot more natural in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And you don't have that, in many ways, with the time constraint, you're forced to get a lot of things out, right? To connect with people, multitask. So it's fascinating. And I think that this will continue. So post-COVID, we're probably going to be going a hybrid model of having webinars plus face-to-face, because of face-to-face, at the end of the day, we all still yearn human contact and conversations, right? Absolutely. And we get to dress up and meet people.
This is true, but you know what? I feel like this is the good news the world needs right now, because if your mission is to solve really big global problems, well, guess what? There's quite a few of those around at the moment. And the fact that the pandemic is no barrier to these people getting together to solve those problems actually makes me feel a little bit better today. So I'm really glad to hear that. Obviously, a global ecosystem is takes into account, yes, different time zones, different cultures, different countries, different languages. I'm trying to get my head around, SzeKi, how does one go about building a sort of cohesive global community? What are you doing to ensure that's the case?
Okay, I'm going to take you back 4 years ago when I first started with SGInnovate. I was employee number 3. And when I first started, deep tech as a category didn't exist. Okay, I want to tell you this story because I want to show you that journey. And when I Googled deep tech, what were the results? It was electronic dance music. It was DJ Martin Garrix. It's like, what the heck, right? And I had 2 months to launch the logo, launch the website, and have a official opening with the Deputy Prime Minister. So no stress, right? So in those days, I would call it the Natural Weight Loss Program because it was so highly strung. But I had to build up that category quick. Right? I had to build up a brand from where SGInnovate did not exist. And you have to look at your audience. Who are the audience? The researchers, the technologists, governments. And these guys want to have solid content, right? So it's building very solid content, talking about deep tech, and you keep saying deep tech and talking about the potential of deep tech and what it could do and what the potential was in terms of impacting industry and how it could solve particular issues that the world is facing. So in building that community is bringing people, like-minded people together, because we are now in a moment in the world where there is a lot of social awareness and consciousness. People do want to do good. So you bring these like-minded folks together who are driven on a common purpose and a common mission. And you bring the technologies to come in. You bring the founders to come in and share about their stories of innovation. Technologies will come in and talk about the potential impact of AI or quantum. And when these conversations happen, the magic happens. And I always say that the ecosystem is really a sum of all parts, because there's not one that actually builds and solves the problem, but it's each individual activity that's happening that all come together and create that magic. I meet Liza, or Liza meets somebody else, and we have common conversations, and that goes on to building other conversations and ultimately building companies or connecting other people to be able to bring solutions together. So that community is important in helping your founders and in actually making something happen. So the community is extremely important. And you would drive certain initiatives as well that resonate with the community to be able to work towards achieving your mission. One of the things that we did very recently was launch the Deep Tech for Good initiative, where we bring in like-minded people who are very interested in wanting to use technology, not just to improve on the commercial bottom line for businesses, but to actually make a difference and to impact how we can look at things around climate, sustainability, food. So these are very important in ensuring that each one helps the other and ultimately the founder to build their company.
No, I was going to say, and I think with that, it's really important, particularly around the deep tech for good or extensions out like AI for good, in terms of also using the deep tech ecosystem to put a more positive framing on some of these opportunities. I know there's been a lot of sentiment around things like AI, that it's predominantly about job substitution or robots are coming to take over our jobs. Whereas, deep tech communities can really inspire to say, actually, this is a whole bunch of new good that can come from this, a whole bunch of new economic opportunity or social or, environmental good that can come from some of these innovations and some of the I guess, missions of these founders.
Absolutely. And, to the point about, these conversations around, is AI going to take over the job? But these are important conversations too, right? Because people are worried, right? People have this aversion or fear of the unknown. And if you don't talk about it and address it, right, you won't get people to adopt it. So, and that is the role too of having these conversations, whether it is the ethics of AI, how are you going to explainable AI, how do you use the data sets to ensure that it is, it has diversity, that the data that you have has diversity so that the AI algorithms that are being built are not skewed, right?
By different absolutely.
Exactly. Yep. So these are important conversations that need to be had. Will we solve them? No, but it is a journey. This whole journey of innovation are little mini steps that each of us takes, right? In our own little world, in our own little workplace, and it all adds up into a bigger outcome.
Deep Tech Bite. So you said that, 4 years ago, deep tech didn't even exist as a category. So as well as building the brand for SGInnovate, I guess you're building the brand for deep tech and what it is worldwide. How much is maybe the mainstream press and the people that are going to be affected by these technologies, how much attention are they paying? And how do you communicate these hugely complex technologies and ideas out beyond your immediate ecosystem?
It's all about storytelling. Okay. It's about telling the stories of innovation. It's about showcasing, and that serves multiple purpose, right? The storytelling helps to build awareness of what deep tech is, of what it can do, and the importance of deep tech. And the storytelling also provides a platform for the founder who needs that platform to build awareness for his company. And that's important when the founder, he or she, goes out and looks for funding, because people need to know about them. In terms of the attention that media gives, I think there is a lot of attention because we have now built, I'm not saying SGInnovate built the category, but we are one of the key players. We've built a community of over 40,000 contacts within a 4-year span, and that includes not just in Singapore, but international contacts as well. And the media is also looking at it because there has been focus from the government level as well. They do see the importance. And with deep tech, because it is a long runway, it's not like your general tech, like building an e-commerce platform. The deep tech actually has a much longer gestation period for the founder. And therefore, it needs a lot more investment and hand-holding compared to the general tech. So there is a lot of focus, and I think the storytelling plays a big part in it. And the focus from the government in terms of the amount of money that they're putting behind deep tech startups. That is something which also sends a signal to the market that this is an area that is not light and that needs to be looked into.
I love the idea that something as cutting edge as deep tech requires something as ancient as storytelling to kind of make its point. But that's kind of my area of things. Liza, in terms of explaining the category and getting the message out to the world and beyond the immediate ecosystem, are there industry associations, publications? Where else can deep tech founders, investors, and interested parties go to find out about this category?
Yeah, I think the deep tech as a category is probably more grassroots than some of those structures would suggest. There's definitely in certain technology, let's say verticals like quantum or AI, there are definite specialist groups and gatherings. Yeah, so I would say for, if you're looking to discover who are those sort of leading organizations or leading opinion leaders, there are a few organizations in any particular country that would stand out. Like I know in Australia, so we've got our deep tech investment fund, Main Sequence Ventures. They're very active in storytelling and giving updates about their portfolio company, but also providing sort of inspiration about where deep tech can take us. Incubators like SzeKi Innovations, it's been around for about 10 plus years. It was probably one of the very first movers in an actual deep tech, supporting deep tech, and it's thriving in Australia. There's the MedTech Actuator, which has been up in Singapore a few times. It's SzeKi mentioned earlier. And then, of course, we've got, the On Accelerator in Australia, which is, first national deep tech accelerator to support research teams get their ideas out to market and form those ventures around those ideas. I guess one of the things we found, though, in building up the ecosystem in Australia, so when I was with On and actually developing On in the early days, we wanted to build in our ecosystem advocates that weren't, it wasn't coming from CSIRO, it wasn't coming from government, it wasn't those same people just, spruiking the benefits of deep tech. We wanted to find a tribe of people in the world of business, in the world of investment, which could also support our statements that deep tech was really important for economic, environmental, and social impact. So the way we went about approaching that was to build out a mentor network. The mentor network started with 4 people who were highly engaged and highly interested in deep tech, but we needed it to go beyond 4. So we, over time, we sort of had a loose design of the types of people we wanted in that mentor network. We wanted a good mix of professional experience. We wanted, gender and cultural experience or diversity. We wanted people who had actually had experience in taking research out of labs and into businesses. And that network grew organically. There were some stage gates. We needed them to be accredited. We wanted them to, make sure they were legitimately interested stakeholders. But they now would have to be one of our best sources of referrals. And one of my wow moments about sort of 4 years after leaving on was someone introduced me, as a new contact. I was, said, I'm director of such and such. And she said, I'm also an on mentor. And it's one of my favorite things. And I just love that. I love that there had been this, it almost had taken on a life of its own, this mentor network. And it was a real source of pride for people to be associated with that brand and that community.
It's become a badge of honor, which is great. So, SzeKi, what would your advice be to people who are interested? How do they get involved? What's their entry point into this global community? What should they do?
Well, there's so many opportunities to learn, connect. I would say go out there, connect, learn. There are many seminars, workshops, events. I think it's a journey, right? First, you need to also figure out what it is that you want to get out of it. Are you there just to learn? Do you want to build a company? And maybe you don't know, right? And see, the one way of kind of finding out is to start talking to like-minded folks. Low-hanging fruits, free seminars. I mean, SGInnovate runs 3 to 4 a week. There's a whole bunch there, not just SGInnovate. There are a plethora of webinars going on, Asian scientists, a lot of these publications are doing those as well. See where your areas of interest are. Maybe you want to build a company, right? And when you want to build a company, perhaps you have an idea of how you can clear rubbish from, separate plastic from in the ocean. I mean, there's already a startup that's doing that. But, perhaps you have that. And there will be like-minded people who are out there that have that same passion, but perhaps a different skill set. And together you could potentially build something. And the only way that you could do that is to get yourself out there. Maybe you have a very strong domain expertise and you are at a stage in your life where you say, hey, you know what? I want to give back. I want to be useful to startups, so the younger folks who are looking to build companies. So perhaps you could spend some time mentoring them, right? And as Liza mentioned, there are mentoring networks. We've got a good friend, Yen Lu, who's from the Ho Chi Foundation. He's got a whole mentor network community as well, not just for startups, but for others as well. So there are many opportunities to get involved. I think the key thing is to identify what is your area of interest and where you can contribute the most and meaningfully, and taking it from there. You may not know at the beginning. You have to go through that journey of discovery.
Absolutely. It's deliberate connection. Steve Blanks is one of the leading lights globally in deep tech kind of entrepreneurship, and particularly how working with research teams to sort of give them the perspective of a startup founder and actually starting to think about their research outcomes as a startup business. He had this great quote which went, the journey starts with just showing up. And I think, there's plenty of places to show up to. I remember in my own personal journey coming into Singapore, I knew very, very few people. I was very lucky to meet Steve Leonard, who was SGInnovate's founding CEO within the first month of moving to Singapore. I was at a lunch hosted by the Australian High Commissioner to Singapore, Bruce Gosper. But I remember Steve sharing at this lunch his views on deep tech entrepreneurship, and it really resonated with, what we were doing back in Australia. So I followed up with Steve. Steve connected me to SzeKi and to Tuan. I very quickly became a regular at the Carpenter Street events. And that then evolved along with my colleagues at Austrade. We saw this really big opportunity to establish a more meaningful deep tech ecosystem partnership between Australia and Singapore. Austrade has one of its 5 global landing pads that support Australian startups go global, based here in Singapore. it made a very deliberate decision to base landing pad here in Singapore because it saw the quality of the deep tech ecosystem here and knew that there would be really meaningful and worthwhile connections made for those startups when they did that landing pad experience. And there's been companies like, deep tech companies like PI Exchange and Arculus and ZTech and Metagy. They've come through that program. They subsequently secured Singaporean investment and have set up offices, businesses, employing people here in Singapore and in the region. So those connections and deliberately making those connections can really lead to amazing things.
It sounds like a really welcoming and sort of friendly community, and a really quite vibrant one, being that it's only been around for a few years. I feel like we're at the beginning of this journey. So my last question for both of you is, what are your ambitions or your expectations for this community as we move forward and start seeing the solutions to these problems come to market? SzeKi, let's start with you.
Okay, so the role of SGInnovate is to build a community around new innovations, and for now it's deep tech, right? And deep tech, as with regards to the technologies that are categorized under deep tech, that changes all the time as well. You should look at it as frontier technologies, right? So now within deep tech, it's AI, it's quantum, it is autonomous technologies, it's blockchain. I take you back a few years ago when fintech wasn't even a category, right? And in pre-SGInnovate days, it was IIPL. We saw that, hey, you know what? Fintech has the potential to really disrupt the financial industry. So what do? We brought in experts around fintech to talk about the technology, to talk about what it could do for the banking industry and what was the potential behind it. And we brought all these experts together, innovators together, and we grew a community of fintech experts and fintech passionate folks, right? And over the years, as a category, fintech then grew. The banks, big banks, UOB came in and they started wanting to come in and get involved in it, because in the early days, MAS was not too keen because it was unregulated, right? So it became so big that over time, MAS then said, okay, you know what? We will come and start a sandbox to allow innovation in a regulated environment. And when that happened, we said, fantastic. MAS, fintech is now under you. We will no longer look into fintech, right? Because that's what we do. We bring in and look at, we're always sussing out what are the frontier technologies that we should be looking at and should be exploring, because we need to be forward thinking, right? So that we are not just jumping on bandwagons, but we're actually creating that market to be able to leverage these technologies and to commercialize them and to get them to benefit industries. So what are my ambitions for the deep tech community and ecosystem? I hope that as a category, these will move on to other regulated environments or for other people to be their champions. And we continue, SGInnovate continues to go and look for the latest and greatest technologies that we as a community need to be looking at. So long answer to your question, but that's what I want us to see. Because until that happens, there is still a need to continue to nurture it, to build it, to explore and bring in new ideas and, to bring in new conversations around the deep tech technologies.
A comprehensive answer, I would say. You remind me of sort of a hipster music fan. As soon as you find a new technology that goes mainstream, you kind of move on and try and find the next cool thing. Liza, what are your ambitions?
Makes it exciting,
Yeah, absolutely. I think SzeKi's analogy with fintech's a really good one. I think there'll always be the need for this sort of deep tech community, because we are supporting that next wave of new technologies, which is high risk, still requires a lot of R&D to get them commercially ready. And we need to create, have that ecosystem so they can go out and do some early market testing and promotion of what they're attempting to do. So my ambition is that, the companies we're seeing coming through now in AI and early stages of quantum, autonomous vehicles, those companies in a few years will be well on their way to global success and really important impact in what they're trying to do. And I really I'm looking forward to seeing those founders come back to support the next wave of scientific entrepreneurs, that they bring their experiences and their connections and their learnings, and the next generation benefits from that. Whether, it's with money, whether they're putting investment back in, whether it's mentorship or, purely connections. And so, maybe, the next wave could very well be things in like synthetic biology or advanced metabolic engineering, where we're finding, new sources of biofuels and protein. So I think that's incredibly exciting. And I can't stress enough the importance of success stories, success stories to inspire that next generation to pursue, what's a rewarding but very challenging career. It's, a career in deep tech entrepreneurship is certainly not for the faint-hearted. But they're so essential to building the companies of the future, creating, new jobs for economies, and really inspiring, kids right now that are in high school thinking about what are they going to study. We need them to be studying these, science, technology, engineering and mathematical degrees, because we need these skills and talents to feed the next wave of innovation.
What a wonderfully optimistic note to end on. I'd like to thank you very much for this introduction into the global ecosystem. I kind of feel like an honorary member now, so I'm going to kind of join. And
you're very welcome, Neil. Very welcome.
Thank you very much. And I hope maybe we'll be able to get back in sometime in the future and just talk about how it's grown, who's gone mainstream, and what are the incredible new upcoming technologies that we're going to get behind. But for now, thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Liza.
Thanks, SzeKi. Awesome to chat.
Thanks for joining me and my guests throughout this series from SGInnovate exploring deep tech. SGInnovate's mission is to help entrepreneurial scientists build deep tech startups to solve some of the world's hardest problems. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, then please join the fastest growing deep tech community in Singapore at sginnovate.com.